On behalf of the Area Agency on Aging, I welcome you to Aging on the Suncoast. Too often we hear news stories of seniors targeted by scams or bilked by disreputable businesses. Whether the financial losses are hundreds or thousands of dollars, these are events that have both serious financial and emotional consequences for the victims. A study by AARP reports people aged 50 and older are especially vulnerable, and they account for about 56% of all victims of telemarketing fraud. On today's program, we will learn steps you can take to prevent becoming a victim of consumer fraud. Joining us to discuss consumer protection is Doug Templeton, the Operations Manager of the Office of Consumer Protection at Pinellas County Justice and Consumer Services. Thank you, Doug, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
This is a very important topic, and we try to cover it at least once a year because there's new scams out there, and we always need to be reminded of the steps that we can take so that we don't become a victim. But start by telling us about your office and what their role is in the community.
Sure. Our office has several divisions. We have a mediation section. They provide dispute resolution services to the citizens. Any type of consumer business dispute. We have Supreme Court certified mediators who would help through an informal process to try and help the two come together on a resolution for their complaint. We also have a criminal investigation section. We have 2 assistant state attorneys that work with us. We investigate those cases of consumer fraud and refer them over for prosecution by the state. We also have a regulatory oversight piece. We license bingo halls, adult use establishments, as well as high prescribing health clinics, and have oversight of towing ordinances, price gouging, moving ordinances. And then a very important piece is our consumer outreach and education piece. So we have an investigator that goes out and speaks to individuals and groups on the different types of scams and how they can protect themselves and what they can do to avoid those.
So it sounds like you are part of the whole process, trying to keep individuals from becoming targets. But for those who have been victimized, you're a large part of bringing some resolution to it. So today let's start the show by talking about some of the scams that are out there that are prevalent and ways to avoid them. And you certainly are well aware of what is going on in Pinellas County and in our area, including Pasco County, because generally what is a scam in one area travels around the region. One of the largest types of scams that we hear of through our victim advocate program are those that are home solicitations or home repairs. Can we talk about both of those? Those are pretty broad.
Sure. I think, first you need to look at how are they perpetrating these scams and how are they reaching out to these folks. So it can be via the telephone, it could be in person, it could be through the internet or through regular mail. And so these scam artists are looking for opportunities and how they can take advantage of individuals and where their vulnerability is. Everyone has them. It's just identifying what that is. So if someone comes to your door and knocks on your door offering to provide you with some sort of home repair services, or if they contact you or you call them, even you look in an online ad and you find someone that is offering home remodeling or different types of repair services, you certainly want to be cautious of who they are and make sure that you've done your homework. Do they have the proper license? Do they have the proper insurance? When someone comes out to your home to provide any type of construction, not only should they be licensed, and you can check those types of things, but their insurance, if they don't have the proper insurance or their employees don't have insurance, if they get injured on the job, you ultimately could be liable as the homeowner, and a lot of folks don't realize that. As well, the type of work that they're doing, if it's shoddy workmanship or if you have a leak and they're working on your roof, down the road they may provide a temporary fix, but have they really solved the problem? Have they really fixed it? And you may not know for 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road, and then you find that actually that's caused a lot more damage. So the individuals you do business with, you want to make sure they have the proper license.
If they are licensed, does that indicate that they have the proper liability insurance, that you have that protection, and you have some protection about they have gone through the proper mechanisms to establish themselves as a business?
Sure. You'd want to make sure that they're, what we hear a lot of times from consumers is that, well, they flashed an ID or they flashed a badge or flashed some sort of license. And you want to make sure you take a look at that. Take the time, to really to ask them for it, to see it, to make sure it belongs to them. The name matches up, the company name matches. Certainly you want to check with whoever issued that document, whatever type of license it may be. Is it legitimate? Is it active? Is it in a current state? Do they have all the proper insurance coverage? Because unlicensed contractors, typically that's going to be a red flag. If they don't provide that, if they don't want to hand it over, if they don't want you to look into it, that's certainly a red flag of this is somebody that you might want to, avoid doing business with, or at least, be cautious if you enter any type of agreement to make sure that they're able to provide valid proof of being a legitimate business that is capable of working within your county and licensed through the appropriate authorities.
And we will be running throughout the show the telephone numbers and the websites for those organizations, so that if anyone wants that information, get out your pencil and paper, and so you can write it down and make those contacts. And always the helpline through the Area Agency on Aging is a starting point. If you remember no other number, take that number down and we can give out those contacts. With the home repair, let's talk some about the red flags and steps that you can take. You talked about doing your homework, and I would think one of those is that if someone comes knocking on your door to say you need your roof repaired or you need your driveway sealed, you need to start by saying, did I have this problem 2 minutes ago? Just because this person needs work and they're putting themselves out as an expert and observing some, the cracks that I've had there for 5 years. Check, take the time, slow down. What are some of the other red flags that should be going off here, Doug?
Whenever there's, especially with home repairs, like you said, when somebody's going around, they'll canvass a neighborhood. And you may see them working in someone else's driveway. And you may see that it looks like they've done a nice job. And they may come over and say, hey, I've got extra product left over, I have extra paint, I have extra pavers, whatever it may be, and I can give you a deal, and again, it's one of those things you want to take your time to think about what you're doing before you enter in that agreement. So a lot of folks, they let their guard down because they see how good it looks, and they're thinking, wow, my driveway would look really good if I had that too. The problem comes back again if you haven't checked licensure, if you're not sure if they've got the proper liability insurance, etc. You may pay for them to do the job. They may do the job and it may look good, but what may happen is several days later it starts to peel or flake or it starts to crack again. You may have those issues. And when it comes to senior citizens, a lot of times there's that, if they feel like, wow, did I just get taken? I just paid $700 to have my driveway painted and now it's peeling and flaking. And I think a lot of scam artists know, they prey on those vulnerabilities, and it's something where they will continue. We've had several instances where they'll continue working right next door, and they'll complain to them or they'll ask them, will you come over and take a look at my driveway again? And the scam artists know, whether it's through fear, through intimidation, that they're going to continue about their business. They're going to go on down the street, and that person's probably not going to complain, probably not going to put up too much of a fuss because they may be embarrassed. They may know that he's done this for everyone else. Everyone else isn't complaining as far as I know. And a lot of times they don't know who to turn to. They think, once it's done, I've lost out. There's really no repercussions. There's nothing I can do. So but on the front end, you really want to check out who they are, what they claim, if they're in vans and they're in a truck or with no markings, things like that. Gone are the days of a salesman who's unkept, and they're clean cut nowadays. They're well spoken. They're very good at getting you to convince you to say, look at this job we just did for your neighbor, look how great it looks. So you have to be cautious of, don't get caught up in the sales pitch, because they're very good. Sometimes they can be somewhat pushy, and you just have to make sure that you are, again, doing your homework on the front end of the job, and make sure that you check them out.
During the intro, I referenced AARP statistics about seniors being, I think it was 56% of the targets of telemarketing scams. Are you seeing that they are particularly vulnerable to all types of scams?
They are. I've read some stats that show as low as 1 in 25 instances of fraud involving seniors is reported. And in addition, Federal Trade Commission last year reported that Florida was #1 in fraud complaints as well as identity theft complaints. So if you think about the fact that if only 1 in 25 is reported, and we're still #1 in fraud and still #1 in ID theft, and with our large senior population. We have a lot of tourists. We have a lot of transient residents that are here for part of the year. So you can imagine how bad it really may be, or how high the numbers really could be. It's alarming.
And we find so many of our seniors have grown up in a generation where we trusted people. If someone said something to you, they were to be believed. They oftentimes came from smaller communities where they knew the people that they did business with. They've moved to this area, and they need a service,
Sure.
but they don't know the people, the network that they had
Sure.
up north. So they need to be cautious in engaging in these relationships.
Absolutely. It's a more complex marketplace, nowadays, and with the internet and having less knowledge about their rights, because they don't know a return policy in store versus online, or they don't have that network of folks that they can rely upon for that advice, to say, you may want to step back from this and think about it before you enter into that agreement, before you sign that contract. So it's important. Again, it all comes back to the education piece, and on the front end, surrounding yourself with individuals that you trust, that are going to help you make the right decision. And if you have a question, you can rely upon them. As you mentioned, a lot of folks, they grew up doing business with a handshake. The expectation is that there's honesty. And sometimes senior citizens have trouble telling someone no, or telling them that I want to think about this. So whether you're going to purchase a car, or whether you're whatever type of transaction you're entering into, if you have trouble telling someone no, or and that about yourself, bring that person who can speak up for you, or who can kind of be a voice for you, and say, we're not going to just sign. We want to review the contract before we sign this, and not allow that high pressure sales tactics come into play.
Okay, that's a good rule of thumb across all of these business transactions. And we have so many reputable businesses, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure that their interest is squashing the scams also. But it's a matter of doing your homework, as you have said, taking that time before you engage in a financial transaction. Also, many of our retirees in this area, they have assets, so they can be targets because they have large pockets to feed
That's
upon.
right.
But on the other hand, they don't have continual income, so they are, the victimization hurts harder financially, because they cannot replace those
Absolutely.
assets that they have lost. We've touched upon telemarketing. Talk with us some about that, Doug, because seniors, again, are very much prone to that. They're at home during the day. They're more likely to pick up the phone. And again, they have this level of politeness, graciousness that can be exploited.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, they're more likely to answer a phone than deal with internet, or to make a purchase online. A lot of seniors, sometimes the vulnerabilities that these scam artists are looking for is the isolation and loneliness. So when someone does actually call them, engages them, and they're polite and they're well spoken, and they find that commonality, where they're from, their likes, dislikes, and they use that to, again, drop that guard, and so then they realize, okay, I've got this person kind of hooked. Now, I'm gonna finish them off, so to speak. And they'll do that through any type of solicitation that focuses on what are your desires. Are you someone that purchases a boat? Do you enjoy going out on boats? Are you someone that purchases magazine subscriptions? Whatever that is for you, they have lists that they purchase, and where folks have to be careful is when they're providing personal information. If you're in the mall and they're doing surveys, every time you give out your information, or if you're online and you enter into a contest, or if you are signing up for a coupon, you're giving your name, your address, those different identifiers. That information gets put together on broker lists, and they will be specific to, this is the type of person who is interested in financial wealth and growing that. This is the type of person who's interested in purchasing cars. These people need credit repair, and they have these specialized lists that they will then resell to brokers, and they resell them to telemarketers, and that's what they're looking to. That's going to be their end. They already know what your likes are, so they know how to bring your guard down. And then it's the misrepresentation, and everyone wants to believe that promise of, I've got a great deal, and you're the one that's going to get you're going to get that deal today, nobody else. And so when they make that call, and once they've kind of locked into that person, that's when you've got to be very careful. So again, the more you put your information out there, be aware of the fact that you may be listed on one of these sucker lists, is what they call them. Mm-hmm. And once you're on it, you're on it. And so they would share these amongst each other, and you're certainly vulnerable for being, preyed upon by these individuals who are really, again, there's a lot of great businesses out there, and they're going to abide by the do not call list and those kind of things. So when you get a telemarketer who calls you, just like a transaction, if you're face to face, I want time to think about it. I don't want to agree to anything today. I'm not willing to give you my credit card information. These are things people need to say, and if anything else, if they're being rude, if they're being aggressive, it's okay to hang up. I know they come, senior citizens come from an era of being polite and not wanting to hurt someone's feelings, and they can get stuck on a phone call for 2 or 3 hours, and to where they just wear them down, and to the point of, okay, I'll give you my information. They're just tired, but they don't want to be rude and hang up, and it's okay to. It is okay to hang up the phone. It's okay to close the door. And that's important, especially when you're dealing with telemarketing.
Telemarketing leads into the charity solicitations. So often seniors get the calls from, they can be legitimate charities, they can be charities that were very small percentage of the money that you donate is going to the cause that has been represented. Yes. Also, I find that there's, the American Cancer Society, and then there's the breast cancer, and then there can be 10 organizations that have some legitimate word in it, but they have kind of cloned they're moving away from the recognized entity. Sure. There are ways to check out the legitimacy of the organization and also how they use their monies. Yes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, in Florida, anyone who's soliciting contributions from someone would need to register with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Most of those charities are going to be required to register with them. What's even nicer, on their website, they have what's called the Gift Givers Guide, and it is a searchable database where you can search the name of the entity that's reached out to you, and you can actually see how much of each dollar that you donate goes to the actual cause. So it will show you if 30 cents of each dollar goes to the actual cause, then you know that 70% of that, or 70 cents of each dollar, actually goes to the telemarketers. And folks need to realize, a lot of times, especially with large organizations, it's not uncommon, they will hire a third party to actually do telemarketing on their behalf. So while that's perfectly legal and acceptable, what you would want to do is research in the Gift Givers Guide who you're donating your money to. Are you okay with 90% of your money going to the actual solicitor and only 10% of it going to the charity itself? You'd want to look and see, and you can make that own decision what's an acceptable percentage, but at least that information is out there.
And again, when you receive that type of call, you can say, thank you for calling. It's something I'd want to research. Send me information in the mail so I can look into it, but not to make a decision at that moment.
Absolutely. And in the types of calls we've received lately, especially with charities, they're very responsive to whatever's going on in the world. If there is a disaster, natural disaster somewhere, you can be sure while there may be certain charities that are legitimate, and like you said, they'll use similar names to them. They'll just change one word. So you believe that you're donating to Red Cross or whatever, Salvation Army, whoever it may be, but it's a slight twist on that, and by no means are they registered. So if they give you a name and you check in the Gift Givers Guide and it's not there, then they're not really registered properly, and those will pop up overnight, whether it's online or via phone. And there's certainly a lot of, again, they prey on those vulnerabilities for folks, and who doesn't feel bad for the victims of a storm or some natural disaster, so they want to help. It's just make sure that your money's going to where you really want it to go, and to those purposes of those charities.
Of course, we've talked about the door-to-door solicitation, the telephone solicitation, but increasingly elders are using the internet. That's a way of doing legitimate business these days, of getting information, but it's opening, again, another door. And oftentimes we're in a world that we don't know as well. Talk with us about some of the scams that are out there that we should be alert to? Sure.
As you mentioned, with seniors' lack of familiarity with the internet and how to navigate the internet, when individuals are on there, it's a great resource for communication. It's a great opportunity for maybe a senior citizen who's isolated or alone or has family members out of the area, certainly to communicate. So whether it's email or social networking, Facebook and the like, it's certainly a great opportunity for them to do that. The issue comes up when maybe a pop-up block or a pop-up little box pops up out of nowhere. You're surfing the internet, you're on one of your favorite sites or a news site, and a box pops up and it may be flashing and it may say, you may have a virus. You know, click here to find out for a free scan or for a free check. And certainly someone who isn't familiar with that may say, well, I want to make sure that I don't have a virus, and I've heard bad things about viruses. It could shut down my computer, which is my gateway to communicate with individuals. So they click on the button, they go to the website, or it pops up a website and it says click here for a free scan, and then alarmingly, you know, you have 250 potential viruses or things, and that would certainly scare most anybody that, you know, that may be possible. The good thing is, according to their advertisement, they can clear that up for you. You know, enter your credit card number and we'll be able to wipe your system clean and be able to clean that up for you. And for those who don't know, when you enter in your information like that and you give them access, not only are you providing personal identifying information so they could commit identity theft with that, but also if you do allow them access, or if they're able to gain access to your computer, then you do open yourself up to viruses and Trojans and different things that will, essentially they're going to capture what you do on the internet, you know, track your habits as you punch in credit card numbers, or if you make purchases, they can be capturing that, sending it to the perpetrators in the background unbeknownst to you. So it may actually end up installing a virus. A common type of scam that we've heard of lately is the Microsoft repair. Individuals get calls and they say, I'm with Microsoft, were you on your computer recently? Well, if they have a computer, most likely they were. They ask some benign questions that most people would say, well, yes. Well, did you happen to check your email in the last 24 hours? Well, of course, you know, I did. It appears that you may have downloaded by accident an email that contained a virus. If you'd like, we can run a scan on your system. And again, they go through the same format and the same scam, essentially saying we need a credit card, we'll wipe your system, we'll install free virus and Trojan software that's going to eradicate those types of issues, when in reality is they're just installing something that's going to steal your information and your personal, you know, your identity.
All of this, in so many of the areas that we've talked about protecting your identity. And of course, you know, the term is identity theft, that we just you never want to be a victim of that, because it can spin out of control and have horrible consequences. Sure. Are there other ways, Doug, that we should protect ourselves against identity theft?
Certainly, you know, a lot of folks don't realize that once someone steals your personal information, your social security number, your date of birth, there's a lot of information already out there as far as maiden name and former addresses and things like that that you can use to take out loans, that you can use to set up an apartment, that you can use to set up new credit cards. And they're essentially cloning you. They're going to use your information and assume your identity. And so the worst part of it is you don't really find out, or if you don't find out, if you're not running your credit report on a regular basis, you may receive a call from a debt collector, and they're calling about a debt that was incurred 6 months or a year ago because you opened up a credit card and you maxed it out, and now they're saying you owe this bill. And so the after the fact with identity theft is just the worst part of it, because it can be so time consuming. It can be extremely stressful, taxing on your finances, your credit, you know, while you're trying to address this can certainly go down drastically and affect your ability to refinance, to purchase a new car, to, you know, make all kind to obtain a new credit card. So it's can be detrimental to someone, especially if they're already vulnerable and had some of those different stresses in their life, from, you know, a loss of a loved one, a job loss, financial loss of some sort, and now to have to deal with that as well, and to have to deal with trying to clean up all these types of credit problems can be extremely difficult and time consuming.
Something that you mentioned, running a consumer report. Tell us how we do that and why it's important.
Sure. If you go to the Federal Trade Commission's website, there's instructions on where you can go. Each year, every consumer has a right to one free credit report annually from the 3 major credit reporting agencies, from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So you can go to those websites individually, but there's a website link at the FTC's website that they can direct you to. You can also do it via telephone and request a copy of your credit report. And it's a good idea because you need to check that on a regular basis to make sure you recognize the credit cards that are on there are ones that you've opened. That's the first hint that there may be something going on. We've had complaints before of individuals who have been notified of medical bills that they never incurred, and what that meant was they were somebody had assumed their identity, gone to a hospital, and actually received medical services as them, never paid the bill, and now it's on their credit report. So, you know, if you check that on a regular basis and you pull that once a year and be diligent about it, you really can head off some of those problems.
Doug, I think we're going to take a break here, and then when we come back, I'd like to talk about some of the scams that really are targeting seniors. So
Sure.
We'll be back to discuss that shortly.
Like any superhero, she looks like an ordinary citizen most of the time, but she's the scam gram, standing up for millions of Medicare recipients who are vulnerable simply because they don't know how important it is to protect their Medicare numbers, detect Medicare fraud, and report suspicious charges. The Scam Gram works at her local SMP. Every state has one, and they're all dedicated to helping you protect, detect, and report healthcare fraud. Call your local SMP at 877-808-2468.
Doug, you've shared with us a wide range of scams and serious issues that we need to pay attention to. For the person who's listening to this and says, I've been a victim, if they contact Pinellas County Justice and Consumer Services, how can you help them from that point?
Well, first, we want them to know they're not alone. There is help. We are there. And actually not reporting it is only going to make matters worse, because they certainly are going to continue on, and it may affect your other friends, your loved ones. So I want you to know who to reach out to. Education is key to combating consumer fraud, and that's what we're here for. So consumers can contact us. We can provide them with assistance on how to file a complaint, where to file a complaint. If it isn't something that our agency handles or needs to be referred to another agency, we can provide them with that contact information as well.
Okay, so you help them through the complaint process, and then if any action is going to be taken in the court system, you work with the investigation and actually getting it to process.
We work with them the entire way through that process. And
fortunately, the Area Agency on Aging is one of only 2 area agencies in the state who has a victim advocate program, because we recognize both the great financial consequences but also the emotional consequences that even a small crime has upon a senior. And we are able to actually serve as an advocate to help any individual through this process, whether they live in Pasco County or Pinellas County, and fortunately have partners such as your office to work with. And we start at the point of determining whether there is indeed a complaint that should be registered, to talk with them. And we find that victims are of every income level, of every educational level. As you mentioned earlier in the show, the criminals are very sophisticated, and so many of our elders are vulnerable to that. During the show we have run, if there's any telephone number for anyone to remember, it would be the helpline number that they can call, and we will connect them with the organizations that will assist them. Thank you for joining us today. It's such an important topic, and I hope that you'll be returning in the future to discuss some of the more elder-specific scams. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope you will find this information helpful.